I take the opportunity to welcome all the business leaders who are with us this morning, representatives of labor, civil society, and the people who never sleep, and that is the media. So you're all welcome this morning. My name is Temba Maseko. I have the unfortunate task of introducing everybody, but nobody introducing me. So I'm the current communications director of BLSA. I see my CEO is now assuming the role of being the usher.
I'm looking at these beautiful women.
Okay, let's start with the business of the day. It's 3 minutes after 9. We've been looking forward to coming to Cape Town. Some of you may be aware that we are on a roadshow to meet business leaders, civil society, labor, community leaders in most parts of the country with a view to sharing with you the new vision of BLSA, but also to talk to you about the social contract that our members have decided to sign and the integrity pledge. I will tell you that we have a hidden agenda. The hidden agenda is that some of your companies will join BLSA in the near future, but most importantly, even if your companies are not joining or ready to join BLSA, they'll be in a position to sign the contract and the integrity pledge that BLSA has put on the table. Our program is going to be short and sweet. We're going to kick off with a presentation from Mr. Bonang Mohale, who's our CEO. That will be followed by a Q&A session meant primarily for members of the media, but we'll also open it up to anybody present who wants to ask questions to the CEO on the presentation that he has done. And then from there, we'll conclude the business, because I'm sure as I can look at you in your faces, I can see that you can't wait to go back to your offices and your desks. So we'll not keep you here longer than is necessary. And those of you who are social media friendly, you can also follow the conversation on social media, on Twitter. You just type. I always say this to people of my generation. Social media, if you don't know what it is, just ask the young person next to you. You just type hashtag business beliefs, and you'll get all the stories about us, and you'll also see what is being said about this particular event on Twitter and Facebook, something called Facebook, yes. Without any waste of time, I know you are urging, I can see you can't wait to get to the stage. I hand over to you, Mr. Bonang Mohale, CEO of BLSA. Let's welcome.
Thank you so much, my dear brother.
Oh, thank you.
You good here?
I'm good, yeah. Yeah, thank you.
If I were you, I would feel uncomfortable sitting there with your coffee.
No. I can sit there.
I'll do the mole for now.
Okay.
We are absolutely honored that in Cape Town, at this time in this country, in this context when so many of us dare to hope that joy and peace will prevail, you wake up and you come to support us. So to every single solitary one of you who's woken up earlier than usual, thank you. Some of you, I know it's a bit late because by now you'd have done 100 emails, but thanks for joining us. I'm truly, truly honored just to share with you the things that we've been doing. This is my 3rd month in the office. So I'm also indebted to Stephen Kosef and the team at Investec. When we are thinking of coming to Cape Town, they decided that they will host us. Stephen has led this business, Investec, with great skill and integrity for almost over 2 decades. This happens only to white people. If he was black, they would have redeployed him somewhere else. He has been a thoughtful and committed champion for business in South Africa and a key supporter and driver behind business leadership South Africa. But also, Dennis George is here. Dennis is an amazing human being. He's a scholar, a gentleman. His only sin is that he's a unionist. And these days, these are extraordinary times. So they demand extraordinary solutions. So business is sleeping with labor comfortably. So thanks to all of you for taking the time to be here today. You are all very welcome indeed. And if you take away just one message from today, let it be just this message. Business believes in South Africa. We believe in South Africa's future. We share the values set out in our constitution. And we humbly want you to play your full part in the total transformation of South Africa that is so desperately needed today, because our people are restless and impatient. You may wonder why business should feel the need to make such an obvious point. Under normal circumstances, would not need to. But there's a sea of ignorance and misinformation about the role of business in South Africa today. There's even a certain president who subjects himself to be used by Bell Pottinger and bellows from his lips white monopoly capital, when the National Development Plan 2030 talks about inclusive economic growth and transformation. So too often, we are positioned not as a national asset, but as part of the problem. This has forced us to decide to speak out the same way that business worked very hard to defeat a crime against humanity called apartheid. And to demonstrate our commitment to a better future for South Africa, last month, I and other members of the Business Leadership Council, 80 CEOs, amongst them they've elected a board of just 12 members, we decided to relaunch the new BLSA, even though BLSA will be 60 years next year. And we decided to launch it in Alexandra so that these big business people in their black suits and white shirts, in the most prime of real estate, walk across the bridge to Alexandra to be with the poor of the most poorest, so that they can see, feel, touch, and smell where their own employees and their colleagues wake up every morning, so that when we talk about the disparities, that it's not theory, but that they've seen it. We decided to do that as a positive campaign, and we pledged our commitment to delivering a better society for our children and our grandchildren. I'm now traveling around the country to remake that commitment in every corner of South Africa. I remake it to you today in Cape Town. Business believes in South Africa. But I stand before you today as a representative of business in South Africa to say something is wrong. Something is badly wrong in South Africa today. Whilst much has changed for the better since the dark days of apartheid, too much has stayed exactly the same. Too many South Africans are still living low-quality lives and denied the most basic opportunities. Too many South Africans are without just a job to regain their decency, their dignity, and indeed their self-esteem. Too often the dream of an equal South Africa has been betrayed by those that we've elected into high office. Our society continues to be ravaged by stubbornly high levels of unemployment, by poverty, by nepotism, and by corruption. In the question and answers, I'll talk a little bit about why corruption is fundamentally different to state capture. So business and consumer confidence is at a 30-year low because of the behavior of our government and the poor leadership where it exists. Some would say where there is no leadership as we speak. And while business must, of course, play its part, it's not enough the government must start to govern in the interests of the many and not just the few. Because a better life for all can't just be a better life for the 400 MPs. It was anticipated that it will be a better life for the 55 million South Africans. So in too many sectors of the economy and public life, policies have either been poorly conceived or poorly executed, if at all. We are not educating and empowering our people to join the workforce. 16 million of our people are not in employment, education, or in training, purely because of the choices that we are making. The environment that supports job creation and inclusive economic growth at the moment is just non-existent. And so we call on all of civil society and our social partners who congregate not too far from where we meet today and their counterparts in civil society to work with us in the business community to make inclusive economic growth and transformation the #1 priority. Because had we not squandered the 23 years of this democracy and business had transformed, i.e. broadly reflective of our demographics, it would be easy today to us defeat state capture. Because under these circumstances, business enemy, when the economy is strong, South Africa, we thought that the business of business was just business. We have allowed ourselves to be portrayed as somehow separate from society, non-inclusive, self-interested, and self-indulgent. This picture, of course, is a caricature, a distortion of reality. We are part and parcel of this society. We are from this society. What then is society if it is not the people who walk into the offices every morning and through our factory gates, pack our shelves, and go down mines every day? We know business does not stand apart from society. It is, in fact, society at work, and as such, a critical player in our national life. At the same time, we must acknowledge that every caricature is often founded in fact. We are all aware that business is not blameless, and we are cleaning our own house first and foremost. You will have seen the robust position we have taken on KPMG, which engaged in unethical and unprofessional conduct completely at odds with BLSA's values. The firm became party to the project of state capture, which has harmed not only our country, victimized individuals, the best amongst us, and damaged the reputation of business in general. And we have called for an independent investigation, independent of KPMG, independent of the auditing profession. And we're hoping that we'll have full disclosure on the part of KPMG. Crisis Management 101 is tell the truth, the whole truth, and tell it fast. Don't drip feed it into the South African community, because at some stage the truth will out. But as we acknowledge our own failings, we must also highlight that these problems are much, much greater and more serious in the government sector than in business, because government has a disproportionate impact in all our lives. First, they play with bigger money than business at any point in time. So in business, there is a culture of accountability. There are systems and processes to detect corruption, and when it is found, business acts. I wish I could say the same thing about government. This is not so in government, where the organs of accountability themselves have been captured. Too often government contracts and jobs go to the connected rather than the deserving. That is why we supported the COSATU and broader labor protests yesterday and reiterate our call for the urgent implementation of the Public Protector's recommendation of an independent Judicial Commission of Inquiry into state capture. That recommendation was issued nearly a year ago, and is still to be activated. Because the president knows when he acts on it, he's laying the foundation for his own imprisonment. From day one in 2007 when he came into office, he's been obsessed with how do I, me, myself, Jacob Zuma, stay out of jail. Every decision has been motivated by that, not about service delivery. So if current trends continue, the country faces a bleak future and will be forced to live with the legacy of leaving our children a worse country than we inherited. That is unacceptable, and it behooves us to leave this country in a better place than what we found. There's no greater challenge for us all, both as individuals and as business leaders, than confronting corruption and state capture and changing it, defeating it, rooting it out. It is within our grasp to ensure that these trends do not continue. It is within our grasp to take the decisions necessary to shape a better life for all, not just for the privileged few. Servant leadership can't mean leaders that have many servants. It ought to be leaders that serve, because the best amongst us lead with a heart of a servant. So I stand here before you today to emphasize that business believes in South Africa. South Africa's future and our future as businesses are intertwined and inseparable. For too long we have remained on the sidelines, but today we say loudly and clearly that business is ready to play a full part in the transformation that South Africa so desperately needs, and to make sure this country works not just for the privileged few, but for everyone, all the 55 million South Africans. We meet just a few streets away from Cape Town City Hall, where the great Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela gave his first remarks after being released from prison. After 3 decades, he did not show bitterness, but used his voice to articulate a positive future for South Africa free from apartheid. We are rightly in awe of him, what he stood for, and what he achieved. A man who said no to injustice, a man who said, not in my name. We now face a new challenge in South Africa, and we must learn that the lessons of Madiba's struggle and leadership and embody, but live it in everything that we do, so that when we see injustice, we stand up and say, not in our name as well. We must not stand idly by while our brothers and sisters face the daily indignities of unemployment and poverty. And we must work with others, be they representative of labor like Dennis George, faith-based organizations, other political parties of any kind, creed, shape, or form, anyone who shares our values and wants to set this country on the right trajectory. And so as we did in Alexander, we commit again today to a contract with South Africa. This that you see on either side of you. And we say as business, we will do whatever it takes. We'll do all we can, number one, to create jobs by growing the economy. South African businesses have created 6 times as many jobs as government since 1994. Our aim is to create even more jobs. Number 2, we say we want to encourage and empower senior black leadership, because janitorial services are exclusively blacks. Middle management, we're doing well. Where we are failing spectacularly is in the C-suite, in the boardrooms. The 80 CEOs who are our council, they are not broadly reflective of South Africa. When you sit around that table, you think you are still an outpost of Europe, not just in the complexion, but in the culture. And ultimately, the best way to close the opportunity gap is to invest in more black-owned businesses, run, managed, and employing more black South Africans, because they can't make an excuse, but we don't know where these blacks live, because they sleep with other blacks, they play with other blacks, they go to funerals with other blacks, and they know the crooked ones and they're not so wholesome ones. So we pledge to grow a new generation of black business and leaders and black entrepreneurs, because it's manifestly in business interest to do so. Thirdly, we say we want to invest in South Africa. Not this narrative that you hear that business is on an investment strike. That's Bell Pottinger hogwash. Anybody that has looked at the skyline of Sandton, you'll see the investment that's been made by business, black and white business. South Africa can only meet the challenges of the future with a highly skilled workforce. We will train South African managers and workers for the challenges that lie ahead. Janice and I were speaking, as we've always done, since time immemorial, that the day we have workers formally represented in our boards, that's the day we are going to start creating value for all our stakeholders, not just for shareholders. This notion of shared value, where we start being just as obsessed with investing in the communities where we come from. That's why the fourth one said we'll invest in communities. Business owes it to South Africans to do more to ensure the communities where it operates thrives and prosper. The penultimate one, we said we'll support small businesses because that's where jobs are created in large numbers. They should be the lifeblood of our economy, but too often they struggle. It is our duty to help them succeed by financing new businesses, training and mentoring entrepreneurs, and setting them up for success. Lastly, we said we will condemn and root out corruption. Corruption and state capture are the cancers that are eating away at our society. It's estimated 100 billion a year every year for the last 10 years. That's what is being siphoned off just by the two families, the Zuma and the Gupta family. They must be rooted out, crushed, and punished where we find corruption and state capture. Whether it's public or private sector, it really doesn't matter, because we have chosen to be on the side of the truth. This is our contract with South Africa. Judge us by it, hold us accountable. We will be able to fulfill this contract better if the government also steps up. But let me be clear, we'll do it with or without government. Business believes government must also commit to creating the conditions necessary for it to succeed so that the economy can grow. Too many bad decisions have gotten in the way of that. And in the questions and answers, I'll give you some of the practical examples where we've just lost the plot. Our contract is not a program. It's a commitment. It's a pledge. BLSA is a member organization. We encourage our members to do stuff. We want them to work with South Africa, to do things substantially differently than what we have done in the last 350 years. So we want to commit on behalf of the 80 CEOs, and by so doing, implore the rest of the other business organizations to join us to play our part, because that's our only salvation. But what we can do, and what we are doing through this contract, is telling South Africa that we will do more in spite of a hostile environment out there. And we are committed to doing just that. It is often said that the tone is set at the top, but Bob Gareth also wrote a wonderful book more than 20 years ago. The fish also rots from the head. Through the contract, we are making clear that we absolutely understand the responsibility to lead. It is our critical mission. We know you will judge us by our deeds and not just our words, and we welcome that. It will be the responsibility of all our members to convert words into deeds, to return to their offices, recommit to the task, determined to be making real, tangible progress in all these different areas. And society will be entitled to monitor the progress businesses are making towards meeting these pledges. Last month, we also launched our anti-corruption oath. We called it the Integrity Pledge. As we call on government to end corruption, we want to be clear that we as business are also doing all we can to crush it first and foremost with ourselves, because charity like clarity begins at home. Our integrity pledge states, amongst others, that we'll have zero tolerance for corruption in our own midst. We'll not act anti-competitively. price collusion, market allocation, and just price fixing are sins that business 23 years into democracy should still not be committing. But we also said we'll protect whistleblowers, because that's where we depend on people who know, are in the midst of it, to tell what is it that they know and what they've been doing. So as I've already made clear, while business can and must do better, we don't live in a vacuum. We also need to see a commitment matched by government and labor. From government, we expect a commitment to crushing corruption and developing an environment that allows business not only to invest but to thrive, grow the economy and create the jobs without which we will have a future not worth sharing. Labor too must step up and show that it is willing to make the sorts of commitments necessary to create a successful climate for growth and job creation. When Nelson Mandela was inaugurated as the first democratically elected president of South Africa, he said, "The task at hand will not be easy, but you have mandated us to change South Africa from a land in which the majority lived with little hope to one in which they can live and work with dignity, with a sense of self-esteem and confidence, not just in the present, but in the future." So today our course is different, but the power of Madiba's words remain the same. We must not turn our backs. We have today signed our contract with South Africa and backed it up with an integrity pledge. It is a statement of business's belief in the future of the country and our commitment to making it happen. So I ask every single solitary one of you in this room to sign this contract and the pledge with us. Ask you to take it back to a workplace and share it with your staff and stakeholders. Ask you to help our campaign generate a momentum and help us deliver the change we need. To start a movement, it may be a struggle, but it is our struggle. And we'll be guided by those leaders who have come before us, who fought to change South Africa for the better, not for the worse that it is today. Let me pause and take some violent disagreements, comments, and questions. I really thank you.
Thank you very much, Onan. I love technology. You know, as my boss was speaking here, I went into my Twitter account. Oh, sorry. Just as I say, I love technology. As the people were speaking, I went into my Twitter account and I was broadcasting his presentation live on my Twitter account. So that's the beauty of technology. You should use it sometime. Okay, the floor is open now. The floor is now open for questions, comments, agreements, disagreement. As I said, it's open to both media and anybody who wants to say something this morning. There are mics, roving mics that will be available. There's one, first one in front here, Charmaine.
Good day. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Tammy Hoza.
Yeah, just speak to the mic.
Thank you. Cool. I'm Tammy Hoza. I'm from the University of Cape Town. I'm a young entrepreneur and also a business science student here on behalf of HN Innovate and the UCT Entrepreneurs Org. I just have one question which has been plaguing my mind for quite a bit of time. What active steps is Business South Africa doing in order to make sure that emerging young ethical leaders come up into the business environment? Because most of the times contracts can be made and there can be this environment where people actively want to commit change, but then active steps to bring up other young people are not made. So what steps are taken in that regard? And what is being done to facilitate an environment which is conducive for ethical leadership in South Africa? That is mine.
Thank you. Over to you, sir.
So the practical steps that we can take collectively as business is what we have done probably in the last few months. And let me just talk about two. So the one is called the Yes campaign, which has been done by a program of business leadership South Africa. We call it the CEO initiative after meeting the president and part of his cabinet in Davos. Yes, which is an acronym for Youth Employment Scheme, because we have demonstrated to ourselves that when young people are employed just for 1 year, their chances of getting a permanent job goes up by 80%. So youth unemployment is north of 50 percentage points. We do that, and we said for 2017, if as the 80 CEOs, we took 10 more learnerships, 10 more internships, we could change these doubly high levels of unemployment in this country in our time. The second that we've done, in 3 days, we raised 1.5 million rand, called an SME fund. Because when you look at our BRICS counterparts, new jobs created by SMEs are north of 50%. In South Africa, less than 16%. In some countries like Singapore, as a young entrepreneur, you can register a business in 3 hours. You have a license, you have a tax number, and you trade. Anybody that has tried to register a business in South Africa and you took 1 year, you are a magician. So we're talking to authorities to see whether we can make it easy. We say good things, but we are not able to execute on them. So that's just the two. But maybe it wouldn't be fair if I didn't make some practical examples that we can do as individuals. I've always been a democracy defender. I've always been a change agent. I've always been an activist. I was telling Crispin and his lovely sister Heather, 2 fine quality human beings, presence of black excellence, that when I was touched by their father, when he was still an educator, we were already throwing stones. And that philosophy guides everything that we do, in public and in private. So I chose, after working for many years, so 1996 I was the managing director of the world's biggest and oldest elevator company, Otis, 222 Marshall Street, in downtown Joburg, listed on the JSE. At that time, 2 years into democracy, it wasn't sexy for South Africans to run South African companies. I was running Otis Africa. 33 of the then 53 African countries reported, first 3 years to Paris, the last 2 to Madrid. And we created 15 companies owned by black people. The pride was just our security guards. We came in the morning, we saluted on our way out. After a year, they owned that company. We spoke to Norman Adamy. They looked after Isando, one of their breweries. When I left, after just 5 years, they were looking after a number of plants of SAB. And then I decided, after thinking that maybe I could, the little I've learned in the private sector, make sure that we can help our government to deliver when we're still naive, and was at SAA. And worked for Sanlam. At Sanlam, there are 2 companies that still exist today. One is called Kurikai. 5 guys who used to work in our mail room, big bags in the center, and pack these and deliver them to our mailboxes. We went to Xerox and said, these guys now own 51% of the company. Show them how to run a printing company. The last one is called On-Time Chauffeur. Some of you coming here maybe were brought in by On-Time Chauffeur. There we had 18 cars. We gave it to them and went to Barclays at that time and said, you give them a loan. On the 6th month, they bought 3 brand new cars, BMW 318s. They had 21 at the end of that year. When I land in Cape Town often, I still ask them to move me around. And every single one of the companies that I've ever worked for, you'll realize that there are some companies that we have left because as a CEO, you do have this energy, this force, this impetus to make stuff work. And if you're really serious about this, by the time you leave here, you'd have spoken to me, I'd have given you my card, because maybe, just maybe, we might interest Stephen Kosef to see what he can do with you, or Adrian Gore of Discovery, or Mtandazo Peter Moyo, who used to be at your old stomping ground, who now runs Old Mutual Emerging Markets, or Sim Chabalala, who now is the sole CEO of Standard Bank. Let's make sure that you're the one that demonstrates the hunger, you are the one that's not sleeping, you're the one that's hustling. Because success is an active process. It doesn't happen by osmosis.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hello, Bonang. Adrian Basson from News 24. Thank you for having us. A lot of what we spoke about this morning was because of one whistleblower that stood up and leaked a number of documents to us in the media, which has subsequently exposed KPMG, McKinsey, Bell Pottinger, and the families you've mentioned. What can BLSA do to be a bit more proactive in getting these things out, in getting business to blow the whistle when these things happen? KPMG has been sitting on that report for 2 years, been defending it. Nobody spoke out. As we sit here today, Grant Thornton is busy with something that smells and looks like a witch hunt at SARS called Project Lion, that looks like dirt digging into Pravin Gordhan. We know the first phase of the project found nothing, but they are continuing being paid millions of taxpayers' money. So what can BLSA do today to engage with someone like Grant Thornton and question him on this process? And secondly, if I may, there's a sense of hopelessness that I feel a lot from my readers as well in the country at the moment. People are thinking, you know, it's up to the ANC December, can they reinvent themselves? People within the ANC says the party has lost the ability to self-correct. Do you see any hope? Do you see any hope for normal South Africans? What can you tell South Africans to give them some hope? Thank you very much.
So I said business must do more. A report at Eskom was used by the Eskom board to say the 1.6 billion guarantee that they gave to a private company called Trillion to Tegeta to buy another private company called Optimum Coal was okay. The company did speak out and said, that's not our conclusion. That's not our report, what our report said. They disowned that. And ultimately, the Eskom board said, but we lied about even giving the 1.6 billion guarantee to another private company. That just happens to be owned by the Gupta family. KPMG knew that its report, so you produce a report for which you get paid 23 million rand. It should have raised alarm bells to the leadership of KPMG. What amount of work do you have to do to produce a report for SARS and they pay you 23 million rand? We've been producing reports for many years. This was disproportionate to what was being asked. For 2 years, SARS used this report to chase the finest amongst us, Pravin Gordhan and Mcebisi Jonase, and used that report, and they kept quiet. Not only did they keep quiet, but they were silent when Friede Farm was bought for 5.3 million rand, and the Free State government, MEC of Agriculture, gave them 114 million rand to renovate the farm, which is capex. A legitimate means of helping people who are in the means of production. KPMG knew that 30 million of this 114 million found its way out of the country to be cleaned, and it came back and paid for a wedding that was held at Sun City, and they landed at Waterkloof Air Base, a national key point. And it wasn't the first time. That's what they ordinarily did. An immigrant Indian family comes to our country, and it does stuff that you and I would never even dream of. One junior auditor writes an email to KPMG partner to say, how does 30 million rand pass as a business expense? I don't understand how it was used in the production of income by a subsidiary of Trillian. KPMG knew. And they looked the other way, at the very least. And the 30 million was passed as a business expense, and Tom Moyane at SARS refunded all of it. So as business, we said, having engaged with KPMG as our members, said with Trevor Hall, the CFO, and their leadership, you better come clean. This doesn't look good. After we had gone through a process and we were not satisfied that they are genuine, they are authentic, we decided to suspend their membership. You sit next to my predecessor of my predecessor, who will back me up when I say in the 59-year history of BLSA's existence, we have never suspended a single company's membership. This was truly unprecedented. But we took that extraordinary step because of Alexander, because of this anti-corruption oath. It allowed us. We didn't even have to go to our code of conduct. We just looked at this pledge and say, this is not consistent with what we stand for moving forward. By the end of today, if I'm right, you'll be pressing the button. We'll be suspending 2 more members. We're dead serious because we want to start by cleaning our own house first. And then all of us see whether we can't defeat state capture. So I'm hoping that that is acting a little bit. And I'm hoping that just with those 2, I've answered your question. So business, I said we thought the business of business, but I'm very proud that business was very active in defeating apartheid. In fact, business defied a sitting president, P.W. Botha, and went and met the ANC in exile in Lusaka, led by people like Frederick Van Zyl Slabbert, the late, Lord Maduka Ndlovu, also the late, Don Mukwanazi, also. People who go and see the ANC die. It sounds like it. When they could have come back and they could have been arrested, but they did. Business decided, when it was the law in this country to pay white people more than black people for the work of equal value, to sign the Reverend Leon Sullivan codes, and we spoke about equal opportunities. Fast forward, when we were thinking about whether we should be a free country, business agitated and orchestrated for the yes vote. And we got a 75% yes that we want to be a better country than the technically bankrupt, let alone morally bankrupt that we were. Did that. John Hall, when he saw Inkatha Freedom Party and the African National Congress killing each other and one another in the dusty hills of Emonhlo, Nkandla, and Ngutu, and Katlon Togoza and Phosphorus, Langa and Nyanga and Guguletu here, started the Peace Committee. We started the first fund as business to invest in tourism and training related to tourism, because we realized that tourism has a potential to be the greatest forex earner. But our mistake was, after we adopted the best constitution in the world in 1996, not because we were clever, but because we borrowed and stole unashamedly from the best in the world. Canada, the treatment of women and gender equality, the Bumiputra experience in Malaysia. And then we got Mandela a saint, and we thought our job was done as business. We went back to our barracks and worried about business. That's why we ended up with this thief who's stealing unashamedly. The Constitution allows him to appeal every decision. So for 10 years, he's been saying, I want my day in cost. Actions, appealing every single solitary one of the decisions. The last judgment was actually quite telling. Kemp J. Kemp, his legal counsel, says, we concede that the 2006 decision by the acting National Director of Public Prosecutions, Mukotedi Mche, was irrational. We concede. But since 2006, they've been using your and my tax money to appeal the very judgment. And they land up, let's just agree on what of these two options do we go forward with. Do I get a trial date, or do I get to make a new submission to the new permanent Director of Public Prosecutions, Sean Abrams, who himself has demonstrated to us that he's captured. We didn't say it, he did. So in that environment, we have come back as business. We said we have lost our voice. To regain our voice, we need to regain our license to operate. And the best way to do that, so that white monopoly capital and radical economic transformation resonates with black people, because conceptually, 23 years, of course you need to do something that fundamentally breaks with the past. So we decided, let's demonstrate our own transformation first. We must look around and say we look like South Africa, we talk like, we walk like South Africa. And let's make sure that we play our part in creating jobs and investing in this economy. Once we have done that, we then say, the rest of civil society, help us to defeat the greatest challenge we are confronted with in this country, which is state capture. Together, let's defeat it. And I must tell you that we have notched 18 victories in just the last 3 months, including the arrogance of Brian Molefe walking back to Eskom, where he had formerly resigned, on national TV, wanting his job back. 3 weeks of action and he was out. The impunity is just shocking. So as business, we have said, this is actually our job. So the first the first whistleblower, government knows, so they starve you to death. Not because of you, because they want to send a message to the other civil servants who are in, so that when you speak, look what happens to you. Business said will make sure that you don't starve. So we work with David Lewis of Corruption Watch. So when you need money to go after some of these cases, we will pay as business, because it's manifestly in our interest to do that. Social Justice Initiative, the Integrity Fund, you need $1 billion that was moved to Dubai. So people need to act on that end business. Because many years ago when I joined business, I thought that now I'm much wiser. The purpose of business, then it can make profits, until that's what we are doing. So when PG dared to 12 and to pull away the security detail, we provided that security detail. Business does that. You say, what has that got to do with business? This is business. It's not politics. That's what we're doing. We put a submission in keeping with openness and transparency. We want to make sure that private funding of political parties is transparent. And it is indeed proactively disclosed. The judgment was, this is business. And that's becoming core. So our core today is the defeat of state capture. It's one of the 3 pillars that, when we have time, I'll touch on later on. But I'm hoping that I'm demonstrating through deeds, not just words, our commitment to reclaiming our streets back and making sure that this is our government. This is not the ANC's government. It's our government. It's Dennis George's government. It's Zwelinzima Vavi of SAFTU's government. It's Ivan James of NUMSA's government. And it's Begin Jalin Jali's government. And we let these guys think that they can run amok and do what they like for far too long. And now we're saying, not anymore. So I'm emboldened that David Mabuza himself says, we were part of the factions. We are the ones that made sure that Jacob Zuma wins in 2007. But we worked even harder to make sure that he wins in Mangaung. We were wrong. Right? To hear a unionist say that, and to hear a current premier say that, and he says, what we are doing now, we're reclaiming back our good ANC, because there are many ANCs. And he held a conference, 10,000 people came, 5 premiers, and they're saying, can we find one candidate that we want to put our weight behind, so that we can demonstrate that maybe, just maybe, we might self-correct, because they are beyond self-correction. So things like that embolden us. When we see them happen, we forget that they themselves were rotten to the core. We say, better late than never. Let's see whether we can work with you. Bring something so that in the first instance, 20th of December 2017, that we have a new president who's not the incumbent. That's the first win. And then on the 21st, we say, here's a plan of the 4 or 5 things that if you were to do by the end of 2018, the GDP could be 2.3% positive GDP. So that's business. That's what we're thinking about this. What needs to be stopped? What can we continue with? What can we start anew? Because we know that this economy is not even performing at its potential. And what we want it to do is to realize its ultimate potential. And we do that by cutting the snake's head off. That's what we're hoping to do.
Thank you. Let me just, it's a bit loud. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. Okay, I promise you we'll still finish on time. We're not going to hold you here against your will, as I know you're in a hurry to go back to work.
No, they're in a hurry to have breakfast.
Oh,
there's still breakfast at the back. Otherwise, it will be irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure.
Okay, so let's just have quick questions and then we...
Thank you very much. I think you've touched on, you realize that the economy is power. In order for us to take over the country again, we need a strong economy. But my pledge coming from a community, I come from a business called Chandu Consultancy. We do community development and catering. What I've discovered that the gap that government is doing, hopefully won't do the same mistake, is that the government is bringing aboard, when they say they're investing in communities, they're actually sponsoring communities. So they're not encouraging development, but they're spoon feeding you. And other businesses, when they say, we're going to go to Guguletu and do something, they come and feed and live. Instead of saying in Guguletu, we're creating this, then we're going to create demand from Guguletu, then we stock our things from Guguletu. Therefore, we are growing business. And secondly, what I've observed is that the gap between, now there's 2 types. If I would take about Cape Town, I would say there's white, there's black business. The ethics, the language, the culture is different from both parties, but we want these 2 parties to work together. So I hopefully that business beliefs will close those gaps, so that our culture of doing business, the culture of doing business in the more matured community in terms of business, is more of European style. So if we want to be inclusive, listen to us from the community side, where business comes from, and say what our ethics, what our approaches that would work for this country, because we are from this country, we have a way of doing things in this country. So if you want to use the European approach, hence the president could manage to manipulate the constitution, because our constitution is also European based. So he's using all those tricks, and then the most affected people by the constitution now, whatever actions it takes, is the lowest on the ground, which is the people on the ground who doesn't even understand the language that's been talked about there, but we are the most affected. So that's the gap that we are seeing as well.
So let me be brief then, and then as we breaking bread, maybe we can be slightly more granular. I'll start with your second question first. Yes, it's true that poverty still has a black face, and that's what we need to work towards changing. That the economic power patterns have been set for generations to come, until and unless we can take some interventionist action. And that's what business wants to do. But you see, we mustn't fall victim of Bell Pottinger narrative of white monopoly capital and white business and black business. Because I made an example. Sim Chabalala is a Soweto boy. He runs Standard Bank now. We can't use the excuse that Standard Bank is white business, because the CEO is black. But we can't say Standard Bank is white, because the biggest asset manager in the continent is called PIC, 1.9 trillion. And whose money is that? Government employees, 2.2 million of them. The majority of these employees are black. And it's the PIC that's buying stakes in a number of companies. So it's your money that owns those companies. Of course, you don't exercise control directly on that. It was the former President Thabo Mbeki who said, if we don't think for ourselves, we place our future in the hands of others. It is up to us to create our own new world. So we must create even new languages. We must go to Nick Newton King at the JSE. Nick Newton King's boss, the chairman of the JSE, is Nonkululeko Hitanyembezi. Somebody black you are yet to meet. To say, but what is the genuine ownership of the JSE? Is it 3% or is it 10%? 23 years, we must be able to do that math. If we can't do that, how can we hope to run a country? So that we talk factually. I spoke about Peter Moyo at Old Mutual and Jimmy Tloti, who's just left Liberty Life, and Shell. It's a Royal Dutch Shell, it's a multinational. But the person who makes the hour-by-hour decisions at Shell today is my successor, Hloniphiso Justice Mdolo, a boy from Emondlo. And the sooner we become business, not white or black, the better. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela implored us when he became president, say 127 organizations have got 220 days working. If I spoke to business, half my year will be gone. Go and form one business organization because we have one flag, one national anthem. That's how BUSA was formed. Business Unity South Africa. We made Patrice to be the president of BUSA and president of MCHAM, all the chambers. Because we are trying to move away from this white and black business so that over a period of time, we can just talk of business. Of course, we have gone backwards and we're working to what's an apex business organization. That's also part of my job description as I stand there. Last one, which is the first question that you raised before. In the interest of time, let me answer it in this manner. The labels we used are important in labeling people. They really matter. So when you label people indigent, they start looking and behaving poor. So there's 17 million people on social security today of the 55 million South Africans. A lot of them come from a province called Limpopo. Now, anybody who knows Limpopo knows that you will be given by the king, it's called permission to occupy, PTO, instead of a title deed, 2 tracts of land. One, you build your house, the other one for crop or for grazing. 99.8% is for grazing. 2 tracts of land belong to your family. These families, they build a house with bricks and mortar. They have no bond. You and I have a bond. So who's richer between the two of us? And the smallest unit in Limpopo has 15 cattle. Is that good English? 15 cows. Some are male, some are female. Yeah. So the definition of middle class everywhere else in the world is a combined household income of $8,000 to $10,000 US. At 5,000 a pop, that's 75,000 rand. Is that household indigent? But when you tell them that they're indigent, the mother will wake up at 4 in the morning to go and queue in Bushbuckridge for a pension because she believes that she is poor. We need to find a new language. Paul Kagame has done a miracle in Rwanda, but part of it is just redefining how people used to live. We lived subsistence farming, and we're able to milk a cow in the morning and have a cereal. We call it mabele, mutoho, and we lived healthily. Okay, I'm stunted, I accept. But once in a while, you'll sell 1 or 2 of these cows, and a family will be able to take their girl child to the University of Terfloop, and they will do a degree and finish with no debt, absolutely no debt. The last piece, When you talk to the South African Reserve Bank, they are not quantifying a lot of economic activity that happens in your street, that happened in my street. In my street, there were at least 2 businesses. One that sells Pepsi, we used to call it a spaza shop. Most of our things that we need at 11, we go there, not to the Checkers down the road. The other one is some sort of a crash where the parents will leave their kids. That's economic activity. We don't quantify it. But this way it gets scary. These people that we have called poor from the province of KZN sold a cattle or 2 and they bought a taxi. Taxi industry today is controlled by people from KZN. If you didn't know, you better believe it. There's 380,000 of them. They consume 7.2 million liters of petrol a day, 200,000 liters of lubricants. This thing we pour in front, we call it oil in the township. And they buy 22,000 brand new tires a day, every day. Tell me that's not economic activity. But when you read the Statistician General's report, Padilo Hosla, they're nowhere. So how does this manifest? Putuma Nhleko's MTN goes to Nigeria and they look at the World Economic Forum's competitiveness report. Just from paper it says if you invest in Nigeria, it will take you 20 years to break even. Putuma says, but we in it for the long haul because Vodacom was 7 years ahead of us. They invest. 24 months later, not only did they break even, but they got the most profit in Nigeria per capita of the 38 countries where they have a presence today. So economic activity should not be defined just by white standard, by these white people. Let's go back to how our forebears used to live, be able to quantify, amplify this so that we call them businesses too. Business is not just a fax and a smartphone. There are lots of businesses that are done in townships that we don't want to quantify. I'll be shorter next time. Okay. He provoked me.
I think we've got time for the last round of comments or questions. This is the list which is most likely to be the final list. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, well, I'll see how to manage it. And the CEO will also try and give shorter answers because we don't want to see people start leaving during the course of the meeting. Okay.
Good morning, friends. The name is Rommel Roberts. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. John Gardner. We're both founders of the Quaker Peace Center, which led a lot of the anti-apartheid movements. In fact, the cessation of the past laws was directly directed to the Quaker Peace Center, ending with the fast in 1982, which I was involved with Koornoff. Believe you me, Pitt did do one good thing. He did not consult the cabinet, and he did not consult the Broederbond. When he sat across the table from me with Dominee Moelman, and he said he was bekeer, he was born again. And Moelman said, Pitt, if you're born again, do the right thing. And the next morning, he announced the cessation of the past laws. It's in my book called Seeds of Peace, which I've just launched. The Peace Center has launched 3 particular actions. One of them is on SASSA. The other is on state capture. We brought litigation to force the state to institute a commission of inquiry. And by the way, it'll have to be the deputy state president because the president cannot. The third is on the issue of the old corrupt that started the whole ball rolling, and that is the arms deal. Now, it's very difficult because Zuma and the boys have a way of protracting legal stuff. So we decided to take a route that will end up challenging BAE systems because you've got a very strong Quaker network internationally. Those are the 3 actions we're currently busy with. Now, on the other hand, we're very keen on proactive stuff. It's all very well good to talk about corruption, but there is a whole need and direction on specifics that begin to cure the rot in our society that's been running for years now from the ground up. That means a number of specific actions. The one, for example, I invited the CEO to join me in addressing the leadership of Khayelitsha that I've been involved with ever since I was successful in stopping a 200,000 person poor march to Cape Town a couple of years ago. And I said I would help them in a way practically. We're looking at, to deal with business, you have to look at the thing holistically. Now what we're looking at is a multi-integrated approach that deals with the social issues of security, safety in the schools, in the community, because security is one of our biggest nightmares in the business scene. And if you don't deal with that, you really are up against the gumtree. So we've got specific strategies. Now, I don't want to take the time now because really now's not the time, but I want to request a couple of things. That we can sit down, by the way, I have another hat which is an international one, which is co-willing, looking at sustainable development goals, and that's Africa-wide, but that's another story. What I'd like to see, one, is that we have an opportunity, those that think like us can sit around a table of a real think tank type situation that's really action orientated. Secondly, that in our SASSA matter, and I'm going to appeal to the business community on this front, we found that a few hundred meters from here, there's a nasty smell, and that smell is called Alan Gray. And I'm sure many of you are probably investing in Alan Gray. Well, there's a story around Alan Gray. We've been communicating with them, and through our network abroad, actuaries, we know they've made hundreds of millions of profit. And for me, there is no difference.
Please try and summarize, because we're going to run out of time.
It's just the last request of business, and that is when a woman in my village ends up with 75 Rand after all the deductions through Alan Gray's comrades, what is it? There's no difference between that and the Holocaust victim whose wealth was taken away. And for me, I want to request that business starts dealing with companies like Alan Gray that have got blood on their hands. And that's my other request. So those are the two requests so we can move forward, because there's a lot of work to be done, but we need to do it.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to cut you. Let's move on to the next.
So dialogue and SASSA accept. Challenge, I accept that challenge. Thank you.
Okay.
Get over short.
Okay, you can proceed.
Shall I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi.
Yeah, we've dealt with him.
Okay, sorry. Hi, my name is Lester September. I'm from FCFC. That is not a football club. It's called the Forum of Cape Flat Civics. Yeah, I've got a professional life where I'm in accounting and auditing, and what has happened with KPMG has knocked a lot of us.
Askies.
Yeah, sorry. Apologize to you all for that. But what I've also noticed over the last few days is that KPMG is not just KPMG, it's affecting the whole business community. We're talking about, for the fact that South Africa was rated #1 in the world when it came to auditing and oversight. It's now dropped to 30th. That is not only an indictment on auditing, that's an indictment on business as a whole. Business as a whole is considered corrupt, effectively, because we're not having oversight of what we're doing, and proper oversight. Iraj Basian, I think, said yesterday, CAs are one of the major players in our companies who are allowing things to take place that shouldn't be taking place. I just wanted to say that you spoke about a radical economic transformation. There's studies that show that the foundation of economic growth, poverty reduction, which is job creation, and reducing levels of inequality is actually the design of a city. We have been engaging with the city and national government over a number of years, where we say that there's nothing more radical than actually transforming the space in which people live in, by reversing apartheid spatial planning, which has never been corrected by either government or business. Where there is evidence that businesses also benefited from apartheid and not just brought it down, right? So what we want to say is, we want to ask BLSA, with your influence, would you be prepared to speak to companies like Naspers and the others, with huge amounts of money, and companies that have invested about 1.4 trillion rand in money markets and are not investing that, to invest that into a social responsibility investment fund that can be used to create affordable housing in city of Cape Town, central Cape Town, which is home to 85% of economic activity. Thank you.
Thank you, my brother. Challenge well made.
Yes, I have to fit the quotas. I'm the only female that's going to speak. So thank you, Chair. I think I'm from Unite Behind. It's a coalition of civil society organizations in Cape Town. And I think firstly, I want to commend the work you've been doing in Gauteng. And I think we welcomed having to come here and speak with you, having our comrades in Joburg, having to engage with yourselves. But I think there's a lot of criticism and a lot of thinking that we're talking about amongst ourselves. And I think firstly, before I speak for myself and some of my comrades, we didn't know about business leadership. And I think that's a problem. Because if you want to talk about transforming South Africa as a country, then we need to talk about relationships and networks. And the fact that there is criticism on business, that you have been quiet for all this time, but only when work start, or let me say issues start to challenge your own work, or when you start being in the spotlight, and I think KPMG is the best example of that, which is unfortunate, then you are more proactive in trying to engage with the issues of state capture, which have been there. And I think a lot of us have been campaigning for years on issues affecting people, and business is part of that problem. And I think some of our comrades are asking ourselves, if you look at social housing that we're advocating for, if you look at properties in Cape Town, business is at the heart of that problem. If you look at schools and education that Equal Education is fighting for, business is part of that problem. If you look at sanitation in Kailicha and portable flush toilets that are provided by the city of Cape Town, which are a problem, business is at the heart of that. But every time we try and bring these issues into the forefront, business is quiet, and we are able to hold government to account because that is what we have. And the question is, how do we hold you accountable without going through government? And I think there's a big question, and we need to talk about that, because if we want to have a proper working and building the South Africa we all want, and I think state capture is a perfect example of how you can't have one sector of society dealing with it on its own. But that's not the only problem. And so I feel like we need to talk about those issues before we talk about relationships going forward and working together, working forward. And lastly, we are at Investec, and we are talking about the role of business in the country. A lot of the problems that happen don't happen in this room. A lot of problems happen in communities. And that's why I think some of us acknowledge the fact that you've had meetings in Alex. But we want to see these suits in Kailicha for everyone to know that every time we protest, people mustn't say we protest because we have nothing to do. We protest because we've tried every alternative option to get heard. And protests are always the last option. And I think civil society is actually frustrated because we're not being heard. And it feels like now that business and other key prominent figures in society are coming out and saying, let's talk about Zuma and Gupta's, all of a sudden we're talking about it. And this is something people have been talking about for years. So I just want to, it's criticisms all over the place because I'm trying to be quick, but yeah.
Sesindiyabule ngokusithobileyo nongazenzisiyo. So, guilty as charged. But this is all about to change. Do you accept? But it will help, I think, if we humbled ourselves and listened more, and wrote more, and moved forward more, and that's what we want to do. But I will be failing in my duty as a white monopoly capital apologist, not to say, but business has been quite not quite test. I don't know if that's good English. And let me just make one example in the interest of time. Hashtag everything must fall movement. People say, but business was quiet. Yes and no. Because that year, as business, we engaged with all the vice chancellors. And we said, if this academic year is lost, the 328 MBBCH graduates that work in rural areas will be there. So the 24 children that get born into Krisani Baragwanath Hospital every hour might fall onto the ground with nobody catching them. So that year, Tabut Lot, who used to be the CEO of Liberty Life, said, I make my properties of all Liberty Life to be available to the vice so that these kids can write their exams there. Stephen Kosef of Investec said, I'll make sure that I pay for the security so that they are safe and secure and they're not intimidated. Jabu Mabuza, who was the CEO of Tsokosan, said, I'll make sure that they have 3 meals a day, every day, just for that year. The exams were written that year. But most importantly, we sat down with the vice chancellors and came up with a funding model called Ukusasa now that will, on a sustainable basis, provide free higher education for the indigent. And we worked out that only 20 billion was needed for 2017. And we put up the first 150 million rand as business for a pilot of 7 of these schools. And we penned and agreed with your activists to go to VEDS on the National Council and adopt this so that we can use this as a model to be rolled out. That night at midnight, something happened. And it didn't happen, it was cancelled. Chief Justice Dikgamo Seneke was ready with the conveners of other 10 to roll this out in the morning. It didn't. That was also, in a small part, the work of business that I represent. Can we do more? For sure we can do more.
We don't have...
Sanbonan, my name is Kaisomte. I think to assist my sister in showing you guys to the public, I'm involved in connecting different people in different spaces. I'm the connector of this. I feel I personally can play a role in taking this to the community and taking your story down to the community. So as the leader of BLSA, I would like to challenge you and ask you, can I take your story down and take it to the community, your personal story and the story of BLSA, in that we move more practically as a country. Let's not just talk about it, but we move right now and not be stuck. Thank you. Yabo.
Let's take the last question.
Okay. That's okay. Oh, sorry. Yours next. So can we just agree that these are the last 2 points, and unfortunately we're going to have to wrap up.
Benon, thanks. These are phenomenal headlines, and I think you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone in the room who this doesn't resonate with. But, as a CEO, you'd know these things don't happen because you say so.
Exactly.
So could you share with us what sits behind this? Because you've made a very bold statement. You've made the statement, hold us to account. And I suspect civil society, as Pumeza said, through Unite Behind, Save South Africa, has found its voice. And this is now in the open domain, and people will hold you to account. So I guess the question I have is what sits behind this and what are the actions that support it? And this is my last comment. I'd like to say it's fantastic to see so many CEOs in the room. You say a fish rots from the head, but leadership comes from CEOs as well. What is disappointing, very disappointing, is that some of the big CEOs, biggest employees in the Western Cape are not in the room. And I wonder what could be more important in our country's history than being in this room today. So I hope you do take that message out to some of your CEOs. The large retailers and financial institution CEOs are not in this room. Where are they? Thank you.
My brother, I'm getting goosebumps listening to you because you're absolutely spot on. So today is Thursday morning. The plan was this evening, tomorrow morning, we're going to have a similar breakfast in Stellenbosch. That's the highest concentration of these CEOs of import. And Friday evening, they said in Stellenbosch they don't do breakfast very well, so they would prefer dinner. So some of them have already confirmed for a Stellenbosch dinner. That's where I'm going when I leave from here. The date was moved from this week. Adrian Enthoven and Johan and Yanni and are helping to coordinate that. So it will happen within a week. That's why some of them are not here. I told you I'm an apologist. Just two things on the challenge that you've raised. So on the contract with South Africa, what sits behind it? So that first one that says we'll create jobs, we have already spoken to ShopRite Checkers, who have already delivered 4,000 new jobs. SAB Miller are launching, as we speak, 10,000 jobs. The manufacturing circle, 1 million jobs. We're speaking to the Gauteng government, and they call it TSEPO, 1 million jobs. Actively, what we can do. And this is in spite of the carnage that has happened in mining. So 5 years, we lost 92,000 jobs. Just this last month, 15,000 led by Anglo Gold, Ashanti's Venkat, 8,500, and then 2,500, and then another 4,000. That one was an old goal because Msebenzi Zwane is acting like a bull in a china shop. These jobs could have been saved. But we go into mining and say, in spite of the challenge, in spite of an intransigent minister, let's see what we can do. We landed on one thing, and one thing only, this thing of shared value. We said in South Africa in this time, if your company is growing by 15%, the CPI is less than 6, GDP is less than 2, and your headquarter says reduce your workforce by 10%, as South African CEOs of these companies, we should say no, because it doesn't make sense. Surely we can carry these employees for a year or two more just to make sure that we act in the best interest of the country, maybe not just in the best interest of Shell at that time. So that's the decision we've taken. That's just talking about creating jobs. So when I started, I said, one of the resolutions we took, we said with all these CEOs, they take learnership, apprenticeships, etc. There's a R1 billion jobs fund that we could utilize more. But we said, imagine if we took just 10 more for 10 more. Even if you don't need them, there's always photocopying that needs to be done just to get them out of this. Will it bankrupt us? And we all decide that actually it won't. We'll find something to do. Practical things like that. That lies behind. I'll take the last one. Okay. Because I'm not running away. I'm eager to eat with them.
Okay. I was going to make the point. So this is going to be the last comment or question. Bonang will be here for another hour or so.
I'm sleeping in Cape Town tonight.
So.
That's good news. We'll catch up with you later. Raymond Lovo from Remgro. Like Crispin, I'm extremely heartened by all the work that we are all doing as business. Two questions. One is, the constitutional dispensation is under existential threat, as we know it. We pinning our hopes on December the 20th, some form of self-correction or saving or whatever. In the absence of that, and given the fact that we are limited by our own DNA as business, what happens in that vacuum? First question. The second one is, there is a narrative, which I don't know whether it's continuing at this point, past this announcement, but one that says there's an investment strike, whether by commission or omission by business, and I know there's been some research commissioned in that regard. You've talked about job creation. How do we start to change the perception that, in fact, this supposed 1.5 trillion rand sitting on corporate balance sheets, negating the potential to invest in South Africa, is in fact happening?
Yeah. So let me start with the second one. So when you Google IntelliDex report, that's what we just released last week, to puncture this inflated fallacy that says business is on an investment strike, because it's not true. But you can't stand as business and say, but it's not true. So that's why we commissioned research independently give us the facts. So please Google that. It's most instructive. The first one is this existential threat that all of us are facing. And I think you're absolutely spot on. So the next board meeting, we are having a conversation as the BLSA board, because business doesn't pin its hope on anything. Shell is renowned globally for the scenario work. So as the board of BLSA, we are mapping 2-3 possible scenarios that are likely to eventuate 20th of December 2017. Because business, unlike politicians, we don't wait and pray in a corner and say, Cyril must get in, Cyril must get in. And if he doesn't, we slit our wrists. Business says, what would happen if Cyril comes in? As one scenario. What would happen if Nkosazana comes in? Because it's another scenario. What would happen if maybe a compromise candidate who's neither the two comes in? So that we look prepared. That's what business does. Scenario is not predicting the future. It's about thinking through what might happen so that when the outcome you had prayed for does not happen, business still continues. That's what we're hoping to do. Mike Spicer is here. He used to work for Anglo-American. At one instance, Anglo-American was 18% of the market capitalization of the JSE. And his colleague, Clem Santa, did some work on behalf of Anglo that we all benefited from, which we call the high road to low road scenario. So we're talking to Andile Sangu as we speak about starting this dialogue nationally, financed initially by Anglo, but as business will chip in just to get South Africa talking, so that we can say, here's our high road, here's our low road, and what's a realistic scenario, and we work towards the high road. At the moment, National Development Plan 2030 says at the high road we ought to be growing at 5.4% GDP to absorb the 150,000 young graduates that get onto the job market, often with inappropriate skills. The highest we've ever grown is December of 2007, when we hit 5.4%, only that December. And then 1st of January, the lights came off, rolling blackouts, and we're in the skid. But the resilience of the South African financial services, recognized by the world, made sure that 2007, 2008, when we went into a global recession, that South Africa didn't. We contracted 0.9% in 2009. 2010, we posted 1.9% positive GDP growth because we spent 787 billion building the 10 and renovating the remaining stadia. So we spend ourselves out of recession. Last 10 years, our financial services, the top 10 in the world. Last consecutive 3 years, number 1, number 2, number 3, best banks in the world are South Africans. We should really be very proud. So with the work that Andile is doing, with a little bit of money from the business, including Shell Scenario 2030, it's what the ANC used when they got to power. We took them to a place called Mount Fleur. They called it the Mount Fleur scenario. Some of the people who were involved in that I can see in the room. They took this and they called it Ready to Govern. So if you Google the paper, Ready to Govern, it's Shell Scenarios 2030. To start thinking about how to govern ethically and morally and uprightly. And we did more. We gave them our head office, which was called the Shell House, where the Shell House massacre happened, because you need air-conditioned offices to think. So, to conclude, 2010 on paper says we are going to have a different president from the one we have, all things considered. But beyond that, nobody knows. The work that we are doing, all it's designed to do is not to affect the outcome of 2012, is to sensitize South Africans as per yesterday's judgment that says it's our democratic right to know private party funding so that we can make an informed choice. That's all we want to do. We want South Africans to make an informed choice, not to pin their hopes on Rolihlahla, Nelson Mandela. And when they are confronted with a beast they can't recognize, they don't know how to deal with it. That's all we're hoping to do. So to stop here, maybe let me ask if there's one CEO in the room who wants to co-sign with me the integrity pledge, which is an anti-corruption oath. Please come and sign it with me so that when your company, after today, only after today, decides to bribe, steal, and cheat, we go to prison together. And then I'll ask my deputy chairman at BLSA, Adrian Endhoven, to come and sign with me. AD is here, so we'll go to prison together. Just one CEO, the three of us will go and sign. A volunteer. Thank you, sir. Okay. AD?
There are the volunteers.
This is a photo opportunity. You and I, my friend, are going to jail. Let's go. The other side.
Yeah, as they go and sign, thank you for volunteering. I want to just take the opportunity to acknowledge Eddie, the Deputy Chairman of BLSA, Eddie Endhoven, boss of Holland. Thanks for joining us. And also to acknowledge Mike Spicer, former CEO of BLSA. Mike, thanks for joining us here. As the sign.
Let me get 2 more CEOs. This is getting warm. 2 more. Prisons are empty. 2 more. It's nice when you volunteer to go to prison. 2 more. CEOs, chairman, Banghat. Thank you, sir. Thank you, my brother. 1 more. 1 more CEO. Thank you. What a gentleman and a scholar. How are you?
As they proceed to sign, I take the opportunity to acknowledge and thank each and every one of you for joining us this morning. I think it's been an excellent session. South Africans don't talk enough. And I'm glad we've given you the platform to talk.
Was dapen?
I also want to acknowledge...
That's your prison cell.
I also acknowledge people who used to give me a tough time when I used to speak for government, and that they know themselves. Sia over there, and somebody called Adrian Basson. They used to give me help, but they're good journalists. Thank you for joining us. The signing continues. On the way forward, as they sign, We invite everybody to get into our website. In fact, we'll give you copies of the pledge.
Good reflexes.
And the contract. We just ask you to familiarize yourself with the document, read it, share it.
Sorry. I change.
And invite CEOs to go back to their companies and discuss the pledge. If they're not ready to sign today, there's plenty of opportunities for you to do so.
I couldn't resist. I've been wanting to do this the whole week.
I'm trying to kill two birds with one stone here so that we can conclude. Okay. Is the mic still around? I would have loved to tell you who are the people who signed here, if they were to tell us who they are, but the mic is not here. Quickly.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, we can't get
Just to the people who signed, just give them a mic.
this year coincide with our board meeting.
I come with you. Let's go out together.
Can start with the gentleman who's just about to leave. Sir, behind you. We just want to acknowledge the people who have signed. Just tell us who you are, your company, that's all.
So this will help Crispin.
Yes, Crispin. Just to let you know that my name is Doug Murray. I'm from the Fishini Group in Cape Town. We're obviously quite a large employer in the Western Cape. So just for the record, the retailers are here. I am part of the NCRF, which is the broader body of retailers. So we are very supportive. So just to answer your question.
Okay,
just slightly bigger than Michael Mark's true words. Just slightly.
This person.
Thank you, madam. Let me come with you.
My name is Heather Son. I am the CEO of a company called Gamiro Investment Group.
Truly honored. Thank you so much.
No.
I wanted to come and meet you, and I've been trying to get to Joburg, but it's been impossible.
So the plan, yes. So the plan is
space.
Okay. Anybody else who signed quickly? Can you just stay there so that you...
The name is Tolani Chandu, probably from Khayelitsha. My company is based in Khayelitsha. We do neuro-linguistic programming. I'm a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. We also do life coaching. We also do team buildings for companies and individuals. We also do corporate and private function catering. We're based in Khayelitsha, and I'm proud of my company. I don't call it small, I call it a company.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
Currently, we have two projects on the way where we're going to be supplying stationaries to school and companies, and we also want to go into protective clothing.
We are concluding in 30 seconds. The mic over there.
Hi, I'm Anton Pillay. I'm the CEO of Coronation Fund Managers. We look after about 600 billion rand of the savings in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that covers everyone. Okay, let me take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you again for coming. It's been a wonderful morning. Hope to see you soon. In the next meeting, we're hoping to open a branch of BLSA in Cape Town. We hope that you will invite us to that meeting and not us inviting you to your city. Anything else, Chair, CEO, before I conclude?
Our hands together for my And the last piece, honestly, the food is great. It is free. Let's talk over bread. Those of you that want to leave, you have been extremely generous with your time. Have a wonderful morning. I'll see you all by breakfast in that hall.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.